However, if you look behind the scenes leading up to this, the camera crew had to chase after George by jeep, motorcycle, and even by foot, as the actor then jumped off a ledge onto a mat, which was cobbled together with another shot of the character jumping into a river. This is just one of the many crafty ways the filmmakers made the movie look like it is all just one single shot.
That wasn't
Getting
too
it right
crafty,
required precise timing, the highest level of planning, and some incredibly clever shooting and editing. The entirety of 1917, a drama set during World War I, follows a pair of young soldiers trying to deliver a message to stop an attack.
This movie? I thought
It was not actually shot in one take, but rather a series of continuous, uncut shots that were then cleverly connected to give the feeling of one long take. While this has been done before, 1917 presented many new challenges for the filmmakers. One of the earliest examples of a one-shot film was Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. A more recent example is Birdman. 1917 pushes it a step further with its persistent action and the constantly changing terrain. It never uses the same location twice. Who was up for this daunting task? Cinematographer Roger Deakins. Deakins earned a reputation as one of the greatest cinematographers alive today, thanks to his masterful work on movies like Skyfall and Sicario. He earned the Best Cinematography Oscar for Blade Runner 2049.
I mean, this is not sort of style of filmmaking.
Guys, I don't want to be rude, okay? I didn't really enjoy Blade Runner. I didn't think it was that good. I thought it was really slow, and it's not even that I'm ADHD, it just wasn't that interesting.
This is not sort of style of filmmaking that is right for every film. It's very
Nothing was worth
film.
the wait.
Director Sam Mendes wanted to create an immersive experience and put the audience in the shoes of a British soldier fighting in World War I. Getting the camera right up in the soldiers' faces as they moved through long, narrow trenches was a major aspect of that. First off, because of all the long takes the crew would be shooting, 1917 required even more preparation than the average movie. For example, the crew built models of every single set, like this farmhouse that the two soldiers visit. Here is the model they built, and here's how it appeared in the movie.
That looked really cool.
The models help the crew see how the overall scene should look. Take the scene where Schofield runs through a destroyed city. It was lit up by flares in the sky. Because the flares were the main source of lighting for certain shots in the scene, the crew needed to time exactly how long the flares would be in the air. So they tested it on a mini model of the city with a light contraption that traced which directions the shadows would move and how light would fall through the building's windows. Seeing the landscapes and sets in person was just as important for getting the entire continuous
Question, Jack, couldn't they do this digitally? Like on a computer?
Shot down. The art department built realistic sets from scratch. Each set needed to be able to accommodate the camera's path. For example, the barbed wire the two soldiers walked through in no man's land had angled pathways so the camera could get through. Ramps allowed the camera to pass from no man's land into the lower German trenches. Meanwhile, tunnel entrances had to be the exact right length to accommodate the camera and their cuts. One window was built to come apart so that the camera could pass through it. Perhaps most impressive of all was the 5,200 feet of trenches the crew had to build. As some of the most action-packed and challenging shots happen in these narrow pathways, it was crucial to measure everything. Every scene had to be the exact length of the land. So, if a scene and shot lasted 8 minutes, it had to take exactly that long to get through that specific area. In an interview with Vox, Mendes said they wouldn't build a set until they knew exactly how long it should be. This required a lot of rehearsing. While all films require rehearsals, the process for 1917 was much longer and more rigorous. According to Deakins, on most films, these rehearsals can take place the day of shooting, but for 1917, walkthroughs were happening well in advance. They started rehearsing at Shepperton Studios near London and then moved to the sets. Every single line of dialogue had to be rehearsed on location. The whole process of blocking and rehearsing scenes went on for 4 months.
It's fucking nuts, dude.
Once they had gotten the lay of the land, measured everything out, and made sure every actor knew their lines and hit their marks, it was time to start shooting. There was another crucial step in pulling off this illusion. The camera could never move back.
I know this is a dumb thing, but I know they make profit and a crazy amount of profit on these movies, but the budgets are fucking crazy for things that they're not really going to all use. Things that are going to build that they're going to get destroyed. It's so much material and value. It's crazy,
Backward.
dude.
Only forward, as the characters had a
Like
starting point
300
and a
million.
fixed destination and could never go back. One solution for that,
How's that untrue?
letting the camera move 360 degrees. This allowed the crew to constantly move forward and follow the characters without making a visible hard cut. Productions of this size call for heavy equipment, but how was the crew supposed to deal with cameras that needed to be mobile? The solution, a new model of high-definition camera that was much lighter and smaller than usual. This gave Deakins the same great image quality, but also allowed for more portability and for the camera to more quickly be attached to something like a crane or a drone. A heavier camera would not have worked with the crew's stabilizers, which were crucial for when the camera operators had to walk and run after the soldiers.
Creatively, Sam and I talked about it. We wanted the camera to be quite steady. We didn't want a jerky camera stuff.
One can understand why the camera needed to be light, as there were cameras running along wires to capture shots like this one, where Schofield jumps across a broken bridge. The camera also traveled on wires for its trip through no man's land. It could very easily be unhooked from these wires by a camera operator. Schofield's journey downriver was captured mostly by a crane. A part of the sequence in which the character drops down an 18-foot set of waterfalls was shot by attaching the camera to a drone. The constant movement created another big challenge, lighting a scene. They did use some artificial lighting, like this 50-foot tall light tower that was dimmed to create the color of fire and meant to light up the entire ruined village. However, if they put lights in the trenches, they might accidentally show up on screen during one of the movie's many 360-degree shots, so they relied mostly on natural light. Cloudy days were more optimal than sunny days, as sunny days meant more shadows.
I'm looking at all my weather apps to see when it's going to cloud over. And then, is that cloud going to last long enough to do a 5-minute take?
And because the movie took place in real time...
If everybody's there, right, and it's cloudy and they can't film anything, what do? Hey, boys, everybody stay home, everybody chill, man. And do they get paid?
Place in real
so many questions I have for
the
this,
lighting had to look consistent. Even a little too much sun in the sky meant production had to shut down for the day. Deakins needed to know not just how shots would look, but how they would be stitched together in post-production. Deakins and Mendes found subtle ways to make those cuts without the audience knowing. This would also help editor Lee Smith immensely. Sometimes an object would block the frame. Shots where characters traveled through doorways or entered a bunker also allowed for easier cuts. Take this shot, where the two main characters walked through a black curtain. Other shots required even cleverer transitions. In one thrilling sequence, Schofield runs through a burning city and jumps off a ledge into a river. If you look at the same shot behind the scenes, you'll see George running through that same city and jumping off the ledge, but instead of a river, he jumps onto a mat. With the help of some visual effects, the editors were able to seamlessly stitch together the character jumping off the ledge and into the rapids. And to capture him even getting to that point, the camera crew had to make sure they were completely in sync with the actor's every movement. Some parts of the maze-like sequence involved chasing after him with a camera attached to a motorcycle. For the big leap, they needed to attach a camera to a longer, more flexible crane. But nothing quite matched the challenge of pulling off the climactic sequence in which Schofield runs alongside a trench in the middle of battle. Getting this shot was a huge endeavor.
We started on a 50-foot Technocrane that was armed in from, say, as we're facing George, from the right-hand side. Jesus. It climbs up the trench with him as the camera's booming out on the arm. He hesitates at the top of the trench. Then the camera's taken off that Technocrane because the camera's basically on a stabilized head called a Stabili. Surprise, surprise. Then they hook it onto another Technocrane, and that Technocrane is on the back of a tracking vehicle, and that's already slowly moving back. So as they hook it on, it's all one move. That moves back. George speeds up and starts running. Meanwhile, the two grips that did that are in costume, so they find a way around to be able to come across the back of the shot, and you don't see them until that point in costume. And they were quite glad because they got money for being extras that day.
Once the camera was on the truck, it had to follow George as he ran for about a quarter of a mile. Meanwhile, they had explosions going on in the background. According to Deakins, they only had enough explosions for 4 takes. And thanks to their tireless rehearsals and walkthroughs, they were able to pull it off on time. And while everything they did while shooting had to be so precise, there was still room for accidents. As George is running out of the trench, you'll see him bump into some extras. That wasn't planned. The actor bumped into them by accident, and they just kept the camera rolling. Had they called cut right away, this great, genuine moment capturing the chaos of the war would never have made it into the movie.
That was good, dude. I enjoyed that a lot.